The wealthy man had been meeting with the young man to humiliate her. The groom's mother invited the bride to an elite celebration at a restaurant. But when she entered the hall, everyone gasped. Leon was sitting at the kitchen table. The soft light from the chandelier fell on his face, highlighting his stern features. His wife seemed to be trying to hold back a scream. "Do you even understand what you're doing?" she exclaimed. Alice turned to her husband, who was sitting in an armchair with a newspaper. "Kevin, did you hear that your son is about to get married?" Kevin lowered the newspaper, glanced briefly at his son, then at his wife, and, as always, sighed. "Think again." "That's it, I'm tired." "I'm going to bed," he said, and before Catherine could stop him, he stood up and headed for the bedroom. Catherine glared after him, then turned to her son. "You obviously don't care. She's not right for you. You can't even take her out in polite society. Can she even tell a fork from a spoon?" Leon stood up, looking at his mother with hurt. "Mom, what are you saying? She's a normal, modern girl. You don't even know her." "I don't need to know her," Catherine snapped. "You think anything will come of this? She's a seamstress. And you're the heir to our family business." Leon smirked. "Mom, what heir? We supply wine, it's not an empire, as you like to say. Don't nitpick." Catherine waved her hand, her voice louder now. "An empire is when you make good money. And your Alice has never seen that kind of money. Her love. She's in love with your money, not you." Leon pushed his chair back and headed for the door. "You don't know anything about her," he said, opening the door, "and you're not even trying to find out." Catherine came closer, unwilling to let her son go with that attitude. "I know, Leon. I know that you're blindly following your emotions without thinking about the future. And with someone like her, the future will be hard." But Leon had already stepped outside. He slammed the door shut and quickly walked down the sidewalk, feeling his anger boiling inside. He didn't like hearing his mother's words, but he knew her stubborn character. She never gave up. "Well, this time I won't back down either," he thought, remembering Alice's gentle face. In the kitchen, Catherine stood alone for a long time. She poured tea, moved around, trying to find a way out of the situation. Kevin peeked through the door. "Still think this will help?" he asked calmly. "Don't interfere, Kevin. If he doesn't hear me, I'll find a way to show him," she snapped. Kevin shook his head and went back to the bedroom. Silence descended in the house. But everyone could feel its tension. The morning began in the kitchen with silence. Catherine, as always, was busy at the stove, making breakfast. The smell of freshly baked tzatziki filled the room, but the atmosphere remained strained. Leon, thoughtfully scrolling through the news on his phone, waited for the right moment to continue the conversation. "Mom, I want to talk about this again," he began, putting his phone in his pocket. Catherine didn't even turn around. "What's there to talk about, Leon? Everything has been said." "I think you're making a mistake," he snapped, putting aside his spoon with half-eaten porridge. "Alice isn't the way you've imagined her. She's kind, honest, works tirelessly." Catherine turned sharply to her son. "And so what? Does she have any ambition? Does she understand what our life is like, what our social circle is like? Are you going to watch her blush at the table, not knowing how to hold a glass?" Leon jumped up from his chair. "Mom, what nonsense is this? Do you really think that matters? Can't you see how hard she's trying?" "She could try until she faints," his mother interrupted. "Leon, you have to choose a wife with both your heart and your head. This is a long-term commitment. And she's just not from our world. Not from our world? And who decides what this life is like? You? Leon raised his voice, his face turning pale with anger. You always think you're right. But maybe it's time to look at everything differently. Catherine wiped her hands on a towel and, looking at her son with cold reproach, said, You know, Leon, I can only tell you one thing. Getting married is your right. But later, you'll regret it. And you're not handling it. You just don't want to give us a chance, he shouted. His mother waved her hand. She fell in love with your income, not with you. Just look at her from the outside. That last phrase was the last straw for Leon. He suddenly pushed his chair back, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. You know what, Mom? You may not love her, but I do. And if your principles matter more to you than your own son's happiness, then so be it. The door slammed so loudly that the cups on the table clinked. Catherine sighed heavily, throwing the towel on the table. Outside, Leon walked briskly, not paying attention to the road. The cold air burned his face, but inside, there was a raging fire. He kept thinking about his mother's words, she fell in love with your income, and he felt the resentment tightening in his chest. He knew his mother wanted the best for him, but her cold words were tearing him apart. Two feelings were battling inside him, the desire to keep peace in the family and his firm resolve to protect Alice. Is she to blame for not being born into a family of business people, he thought, clenching his fists. His phone rang in his pocket. It was Alice. Leon stopped to answer. Her voice was soft but reassuring. Hi. How are you? Everything okay? Leon closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Yeah, everything's fine. Just a little tired. But don't worry, we'll handle it. Leon, she hesitated. If I'm causing any trouble with your family, maybe it's better. Don't even think about saying that, he interrupted sharply. This is our life. We'll figure it out. After the conversation, he felt a little calmer, but the pain from the morning argument still lingered. Leon knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for it, for the sake of his love. Leon sat in the car, tapping his fingers on the wheel. He stopped in front of Alice's house and watched as the light from her window gently illuminated the curtains. After the morning talk with his mother, his soul felt heavy, but he knew Alice needed to know the truth. He sighed, grabbed the bouquet of chrysanthemums he bought on the way, and walked to the door. Alice opened it immediately, as though she had been waiting for him. Her blonde hair was tied in a ponytail, and worry was visible on her face. Hi, Leon, she said, stepping aside. Come in. Alice led him into a small but cozy kitchen. A cup with unfinished tea stood on the table, and an open book lay next to it. Would you like some tea? She offered, sitting across from him. No, thank you, Leon replied, placing the bouquet on the table. How are you? Alice shrugged. Her gaze fell on the flowers. I'm good. And you? You seem a bit tense. Leon sighed and leaned on the table. Alice, I spoke with my mom again today. Alice froze for a moment but then nodded. And what did she say? The same thing as always, he replied bitterly. She believes you can be part of our family. She thinks you're with me just for the money. Alice looked away. Her hands trembled, and she placed them on her knees, trying to hide the emotions flooding over her. I knew she thought that, she said quietly. Maybe she's right? What? Leon jumped up, looking at her in confusion. Alice, are you serious? Alice raised her eyes. Pain was evident in them. Leon, I'm not from your world. You have a rich family, and I'm a seamstress. My education is just tailoring and sewing courses. How can I measure up to what she wants?" Leon sat back down, covering her hand with his. "Alice, listen. I'm not going to adjust to her expectations. I love you, not what you do or how much you earn. Did I choose you based on conditions?" She shook her head, giving a faint smile. "You speak so confidently. But what will happen if she manages to turn you against me?" Leon squeezed her hand tighter, leaning closer. "That won't happen. You mean more to me than anything. Mom isn't always right, and I won't let her destroy what we have." Alice looked at him for a long time, as if trying to find a hidden agenda in his words. But Leon's eyes were sincere. She slowly exhaled. "I just don't want you to have problems because of me." "Problems are her opinion, not you," Leon said firmly. "We'll handle it together." A pause filled the room, which was broken by the sound of her phone ringing. Alice silenced it and returned her gaze to Leon. "You know, I never wanted big expectations," she said. "But with you, I want to try." Leon smiled, for the first time that day feeling relieved. "That's the right attitude. Everything will be fine, Alice. The most important thing is that we're together." They sat for a while longer, discussing the upcoming meeting with his parents. The tension gradually shifted to warmth. Leon felt that he had made the right move, calming her down, and he was ready to go all the way for their happiness. Later, Alice was sitting at the sewing machine, carefully stitching even seams. Her small workshop felt cozy, fabrics and patterns hung on the walls, and a vase with wildflowers stood in the corner. Suddenly, her phone vibrated on the table. Alice glanced at the screen and froze. It was Catherine calling. She wiped her hands on her apron, took a deep breath, and answered. "Hello." "Hello, Alice." Catherine's voice sounded deliberately polite, but cold. "Good afternoon, Alice. I hope I'm not interrupting." "No, everything's fine," Alice replied, sitting down at the table. She could feel her heart start to race. "Great. You know that my birthday is coming up soon," Catherine continued without waiting for an answer. "I've decided to invite you. It's an important event. There will be guests. After all, we are family." Alice felt her fingers grip the phone a little harder than necessary. "Thank you for the invitation, Catherine." "Wonderful. The celebration will be at the best restaurant in town. I hope you'll find the time. See you then." Catherine hung up without leaving time for clarification. Alice placed the phone down and stared at the table. She didn't do this for no reason, Alice thought. There was clearly something sinister behind this invitation. Her hands were shaking, and she couldn't focus on her work. At that moment, the workshop door opened, and her regular client Tiffany walked in. The elegant, self-confident woman looked as impeccable as always, a strict suit, a neat hairstyle. "Hi, darling," Tiffany smiled. "What's going on?" Alice looked up at her. It was Catherine who called. "She invited me to her birthday." "And so what?" Tiffany sat down across from her and placed her handbag on the table. "That's a good thing." "No, it's not good," Alice sighed. "She wants to humiliate me, make me look bad in front of everyone." Tiffany looked at her intently. "And you know that?" Alice nodded. "She thinks I'm not good enough for their family. I don't know what to do." Tiffany leaned closer, her voice softening. "Listen, darling, if she's decided to invite you, that's her mistake. Now your task is not to give her what she wants." Alice frowned. But how? I don't know how to behave. And I don't have a suitable dress. Tiffany leaned back in her chair, thinking as she looked at Alice. A dress? That's not a problem. I'll help you. And as for behavior, you learn quickly. We'll make sure that on her birthday, everyone will be looking at you. Do you think so? Alice asked timidly. I know so, Tiffany replied firmly. You deserve this. And no one, not even Catherine, will be able to humiliate you if you don't let them. Alice felt a slight surge of confidence. She knew that a difficult evening awaited her, but with Tiffany's support, she now had a chance to show everyone that she was capable of more. Tiffany stood up and headed for the door. We'll start preparing tomorrow. Don't worry, Alice. Everything will be fine. Alice watched her leave and smiled for the first time that day. She didn't know how everything would turn out, but now she was sure that she had support. The next morning, Alice stood at the gate of Tiffany's house. The tall mansion, surrounded by a well-maintained garden, looked impressive. She felt a little unsure, but Tiffany was so convinced of her success that refusing was out of the question. A young man with a cheerful smile opened the door. Alice, welcome. I'm Dave, Tiffany's assistant. Please come in. Alice nodded, slightly embarrassed, and stepped inside. The house was elegant but not overly ornate, pastel tones, strict furniture, and everywhere there was perfect order. Here you are, came Tiffany's voice as she descended the stairs. So? Alice sighed. I'm not sure. Tiffany raised an eyebrow. Come on, no, I'm not sure. We're going to work on making you shine. Trust me, I know how to do it. They walked into the spacious living room, where etiquette books, a set of cutlery, and even wine glasses were already on the table. Alice glanced at it all, feeling self-conscious, but Tiffany immediately began explaining. Let's start with the basic manners. You need to be confident, even if everything around you is new. That's the main rule. Tiffany sat at the table and placed a knife and fork in front of Alice. Look, we'll start with the simple stuff. These utensils are for the main course, and these are for appetizers. Alice listened carefully, trying to memorize every detail. Half an hour later, she confidently picked up the right wine glass and knew which fork to use for fish. See, it's not that difficult, Tiffany smiled. Now, time for a fitting. They went upstairs, where there was a whole wardrobe of evening dresses. Tiffany was picking fabrics and styles, while Alice stood in front of the mirror, nervously examining her reflection. You'll look great in something elegant, but simple, Tiffany said, going through the dresses. No loud outfits. You should be the center of attention, not the clothes. At that moment, Dave peeked into the room. How's our transformation going? Everything's great, Tiffany answered, handing Alice a dress. What, you've already decided it's all done? I just came to admire, Dave grinned. Alice, don't worry. You already look great. Alice blushed and looked down. Thank you, but I think it's not enough. Dave suddenly grew serious, looking at her intently. You know, I've seen many people trying to look expensive. It's immediately obvious. But you're real. That's what makes you beautiful. Tiffany nodded approvingly. See, even he noticed. You've got this, Alice. After several hours of fittings and lessons, Alice felt exhausted but much more confident. She now looked like a confident young woman in an elegant dark blue dress. You're ready, Tiffany said, smiling. Tomorrow, they'll see that you're worth far more than anyone could have imagined. Alice nodded gratefully, feeling for the first time in a long while that she had a real chance at success. Meanwhile, Leon sat in his father's office, nervously going through papers on the desk. Kevin silently watched his son, slightly swaying his glass of brandy. The atmosphere was tense. Leon had just returned from the restaurant, where preparations for his mother's birthday were underway. "Leon, why are you so worked up?" Kevin finally asked, setting his glass down. Leon suddenly lifted his head. "I don't understand why Mom is doing this." "What do you mean?" His father squinted, but his look was more tired than curious. "She specifically invited Alice to humiliate her in front of everyone. It's so obvious." Leon spoke quickly, his emotion starting to show. Kevin shook his head. "Catherine has always been strict with her judgments. But you chose, Leon. She thinks she has the right to decide who is suitable for the family. That's none of her business." Leon shouted, standing up. "She doesn't even try to get to know Alice, she just dismisses her because Alice isn't from our circle." Kevin sighed. "Did you want her to immediately accept her with open arms?" Leon sank back into the chair, letting out a heavy sigh. "I just want her to stop making everything so complicated." His father remained silent, taking another sip of his drink. Leon felt that continuing the conversation was pointless. He stood up and, without saying goodbye, headed for the exit. By the time he arrived at Alice's workshop, it was already getting dark. She opened the door, looking at him in surprise. "Hi, Leon. You're early today." He walked inside, glancing around. In the corner stood her new dress, elegant but not ostentatious. On the table were unfolded etiquette books. "Alice, we need to talk," he began, sitting down on a chair. "What's wrong?" She tensed up, sitting across from him. "I'm sure Mom planned all this on purpose. Her birthday isn't just a celebration. It's a trap to make you look bad," he spoke quickly, as if rushing to say everything before he changed his mind. Alice nodded. Her face remained calm. "I know, Leon. I realized that during the call." "You know?" He fell silent, processing her words. "And you're still going?" "Yes, I'm going. Not for her, for us, Leon." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly troubled. "Alice, I want you to succeed. Maybe you need money? For anything, jewelry, makeup, shoes." Alice recoiled sharply. Her expression changed. "Are you serious?" Her voice sounded hurt. "You think?" "No, Alice, not like that." Leon stammered, realizing he had made a mistake. "Then why would you offer it?" She stood up, her frustration growing. "You know I'm not used to living extravagantly. And now you want me to buy their approval?" "Alice, I just wanted to help," he muttered, feeling guilty. She shook her head. "Leon, if I go there, I'll be myself. I won't pretend to be someone else." He looked at her, his heart tightening. Alice was right, but he felt powerless. He knew how hard it would be for her, and he couldn't change that. "I believe in you, Alice," he finally said softly. "I'm just afraid it's all too unfair." She stepped closer, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "We'll handle it together. But I have to do it on my own." Leon nodded. Though doubts were tearing him up inside, he knew he couldn't protect her from everything, but he believed Alice would make it through. They embraced, and for a moment, he felt a little lighter in his soul. The next morning, Alice arrived again at Tiffany's house. She was greeted by Dave, this time holding a cup of coffee. "Hi, Alice." Ready for the marathon? It's going to be a busy day, he winked, handing her a second cup. I'll try, she smiled, accepting the coffee. In the spacious living room, Tiffany was already standing with a small list in her hands. She nodded as she greeted Alice. Good morning. We don't have much time, so let's start right away, Tiffany said. Alice sat at the table, where the etiquette books, napkins, and cutlery were laid out once again. She noticed a plate with an unusual dessert, small pieces of fruit, and a spoon. Today, we'll go over a few more details, Tiffany began. How to carry yourself at the table. How to use the napkin so it looks natural. Tiffany gave clear instructions, while Dave observed, occasionally making light jokes. You'll be considered a certified expert in table etiquette, he said with a grin. And if not, you'll have to retake the exam, he added. Alice focused on the small pieces of fruit. Their light-hearted exchanges helped ease the atmosphere, but Alice felt more and more confident. Every time she did something right, Tiffany nodded slightly, and Dave commented with a smile. Perfect. Now you're ready for a lunch with the ambassador. After lunch came the time for the final fitting. Alice entered the dressing room, where the chosen dress was hanging on a mannequin. Elegant, indigo in color, it shimmered in the light. It's simply incredible, Alice whispered, touching the fabric. The dress isn't incredible, Tiffany replied, adjusting the fold. You are, it's just a tool to highlight your natural beauty. Dave, standing by the door, laughed. And Tiffany is right again. You'll be magnificent. Alice sat in front of the mirror, where Tiffany began styling her hair. Every movement was precise and confident, yet the room carried a light, relaxed atmosphere. Dave sat on the couch, observing the process. Alice, he said, aren't you afraid? She looked at him through the mirror and smiled. I am, of course, but do I have a choice? Dave shook his head. That's the right mindset, but know this, Tiffany and I will be right here if anything goes wrong. Just remember that you're not alone. Thank you, Alice quietly replied, feeling warmth inside from his words. Finally, the time for the full transformation came. Alice stood up and put on the dress. When she stepped out of the wardrobe, there was silence in the room. Well, she asked, nervously adjusting the fabric on her shoulders. Dave whistled. Alice, you're breathtaking. Tiffany silently approached Alice, fixed a lock of her hair, and smiled. Are you ready? Alice looked at herself in the mirror and felt her confidence gradually filling her from within. She no longer doubted that she could handle the upcoming challenge. Tomorrow, Tiffany said, everyone will see that you're worthy of being by Leon's side. Alice nodded, her voice firm. I'll prove it. The elegant restaurant was already filled with guests. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers danced on champagne glasses, and the sounds of the piano smoothly filled the space, blending with the hum of conversation. Catherine stood at the entrance, greeting guests. She looked magnificent in a dark green dress, her manners impeccable, and there was a subtle but self-assured smile on her face. So, today will you introduce us to your son's bride? Asked one of her friends, adjusting her pearl necklace. We'll see, Catherine replied with a cold smile. If she has the courage to show up. The guests exchanged glances. Many had already heard about Alice and her humble background. The whispers quickly spread through the hall. They say she's a seamstress, a voice remarked from somewhere nearby. Oh, really? Well, let's see how she looks today, another voice added. Leon sat at one of the tables, nervously gripping a napkin. He noticed the sideways glances from the guests and overheard their cutting remarks, but his attention was fixed on his mother, who, with every new guest, was becoming more convinced of her correctness. "Alice isn't coming, Leon." "Where's your bride?" Catherine asked, approaching with a slight sneer on her face. Leon replied confidently, though he felt a twinge of unease. "She's coming." Catherine simply shrugged. "Well, we'll wait." When the restaurant doors opened, the hall fell silent. Alice entered, pausing for a moment at the entrance. Her indigo dress accentuated her graceful figure, and her hairstyle was done in a way that made it impossible to look away. She scanned the room confidently and slowly made her way to Leon. Someone lowered their glass, and others leaned in closer to get a better look at her. "Is that her?" whispered one of the women. "Incredible," mumbled a man nearby. Leon stood up, looking at Alice as if he were seeing her for the first time. "Alice, you're amazing," he exhaled, walking toward her. "Thank you," she replied, smiling. Catherine narrowed her eyes, studying Alice carefully. Well, Alice, it's nice to see you," she said, extending her hand. "Come on, sit down." Alice nodded and sat at the table, trying to look casual. Catherine took the seat opposite her, her gaze scrutinizing. "Alice, have you tried oysters?" Catherine suddenly asked. Alice raised an eyebrow but didn't lose her composure. "Well, that's wonderful then." When the dish was brought to the table, Catherine secretly watched Alice, hoping for awkwardness. But Alice carefully picked up the right utensil and, without losing her dignity, tried the oyster. "It's very delicious," she remarked, returning the fork to its place. "Wonderful," Catherine murmured. Hiding her disappointment, Alice continued to maintain the conversation at the table. Topics about travel and restaurants sparked more interest, and the conversation became livelier. One of the elderly men in a suit leaned toward Leon. "Your fiancée is very intelligent. She studied art," he said. Leon smiled. "No, she just learns quickly." Catherine observed all this with slight irritation. She hadn't expected Alice to so confidently enter her world. The tension between them didn't fade, despite the evening continuing. When dessert was served, Catherine decided to test her again. "This is flan," she explained, looking at Alice. "It's quite difficult to eat correctly, isn't it?" "Depends on how tasty it is," Alice answered calmly, making Leon smile. Alice carefully picked up the spoon and began to eat, making no mistake whatsoever. With each passing minute, she grew more confident. As the evening drew to a close, the guests were charmed by Alice. One of the women approached Catherine as everyone started to leave. "You know, she's perfect for you, elegant, well-mannered," the woman said. "Perhaps," Catherine replied shortly, unwilling to admit defeat. As everyone was preparing to leave, Leon approached Alice. "You were amazing," he whispered. "Thank you." "But this isn't the end," she replied. They left the restaurant, leaving behind an evening that would forever change their relationship with the family. Alice proved she was worthy of being with Leon, despite everything. The evening continued. The guests gradually took their seats at the tables, discussing their affairs and the events of the evening. Alice, now feeling confident, stood up for a glass of water and stopped by a tall window, feeling relief after having withstood all of Catherine's tests. But the tranquility was broken by the voices of the guests behind her. "Did you see how she held herself?" A woman's voice, with a hint of surprise, reached her ears. "Like an aristocrat." "And look at her hands," a man laughed quietly. "You can't hide that she's used to working. She's a seamstress after all, and it's obvious," added another woman. "She seems like someone from another life," one of them continued. Alice froze. These words stung her deeply, and it hurt even more when she heard Leon's voice nearby with those who were speaking. "Well, Alice is good. She just has a hard time getting used to our life," he said with clear uncertainty. "Leon, you're too soft," one of the guests smirked. "Your mother is definitely right. A girl like that could become a burden." "Come on," Leon tried to joke, but barely managed to keep his composure. Alice returned to her seat but couldn't bring herself to raise her eyes. She heard more mockery directed at her, and Leon's indifference to it was the last straw. She hadn't expected him, her support, to be so indifferent. Alice quietly stood up, took her purse, and headed toward the exit. No one stopped her, everyone was busy with their own conversations. As she was about to open the door, Leon ran up to her. "Alice, where are you going?" he asked, grabbing her hand. She stopped but didn't turn around. "I don't belong here, Leon," she replied, her voice firm. "Wait. What happened?" He tried to look at her face, but she turned away. Alice exhaled sharply and turned toward him. "Leon, I heard you talking about how hard it is for me to get used to your life. I heard how the other guests were humiliating me. And you stood there doing nothing." "You don't want to argue with them," she interrupted, looking him straight in the eyes. "But to protect me, just once, Leon? If you can't do it now, what will happen later?" Leon froze, realizing she was right. He didn't know what to say. "I tried," Alice continued, her voice trembling. "I did everything to be worthy of you, but you didn't try to be worthy of me." She turned and left, leaving him alone. Leon stood at the door, feeling his entire body fill with helplessness. He thought he had always done everything right, but at that moment, he realized that somewhere along the way, he had missed the most important thing. Alice's words stuck in his head. He slowly returned to the hall, but he felt that the evening was over for him. It was hard for Leon to even make eye contact with the guests. He knew that he hadn't just lost a girlfriend, but someone who was ready to fight for their love. The cold wind swirled the leaves along the deserted street. Alice walked quickly, not looking back. Her footsteps echoed in the silence, interrupted only by the sounds of distant cars. There was a storm in her soul, but her face remained calm. Her eyes glistened with restrained tears. "Wait!" Leon's voice called from behind, forcing her to stop. She didn't turn around, but stood still. Soon, Leon caught up with her, breathing heavily from walking fast. "Alice, please listen to me," he began, reaching out toward her shoulder. Alice stepped back sharply, looking at him with a cold gaze. "What do you want to say?" He hesitated. The words he had prepared vanished from his mind. He wanted to explain, but each word felt wrong. I'm guilty," he finally exhaled. "Guilty?" Alice repeated with a bitter smile. "Do you understand what exactly you're guilty of?" Leon raised his hands, trying to find the right words. "I didn't protect you. I should have said something, but I panicked." His voice was full of bitterness and pain. "Is that all you can say?" She lowered her eyes. "I didn't want you to feel humiliated. I was just trying to keep the peace." Alice sighed, tightly gripping the strap of her handbag. "Keep the peace between whom, Leon? Between me and your mother? Or between me and your friends who think I'm unworthy?" Leon took a step forward, but Alice raised her hand, stopping him. "Understand," she said. "I tried. I did everything to be a part of your life. But your life is your mother's. It's her world, and you can't get out of it." "That's not true," Leon hotly disagreed. "I chose you, but you didn't choose us. You chose to avoid conflict, instead of standing up for me," she firmly replied. Alice turned away, looking into the distance. Her voice became quieter but more resolute. I can't build a life where I constantly have to prove I'm worth something. And you, Leon, you're too afraid of losing other people's approval. Leon couldn't find any words. He knew she was right, but he didn't want to give up. Alice, I can fix everything. I'll try. Give me a chance. Alice turned toward him, her eyes full of tears, but her voice remained confident. No, Leon. You're a good person, but you're not ready to fight for what's important to you. And I can't wait for you to decide what matters more to you. She turned and took a step forward, but stopped for a second. Find someone your mother will approve of. That will make you happier. With those words, Alice walked away, leaving Leon standing alone in the middle of the empty street. He watched her leave, feeling his heart tighten with the realization of his loss. The cold wind burned his face, but he didn't move. For the first time in a long time, he was left alone with himself and his mistakes. Around him, it was empty and quiet, just like his soul. He understood that he had missed something truly important, and now it was impossible to change it. Alice walked down the night street, immersed in her thoughts. The wind had picked up, but she barely noticed the cold. Her inner world was in turmoil, her heart torn by pain and disappointment. She tried to walk faster, but the words she had said to Leon kept swirling in her head. When she reached the lit parking lot near the restaurant, she saw a familiar silhouette by her car. Alice froze, squinting to see better. It was Dave, and upon seeing her, he waved. Alice, finally. I've been waiting for you, he said as he approached. Alice frowned, not hiding her surprise. Dave, what are you doing here? I thought you might need some support, he replied with a shrug. Support, she repeated with slight irony, but her voice trembled. Yeah, I guess it's hard to walk away smiling after a night like that. True, Dave said gently. Alice lowered her gaze, feeling the warmth of his words melt the tension inside her. It's true, she confessed, pressing her handbag to her chest. Dave nodded and then gestured for her to sit on a nearby bench. Let's talk. Alice sat down beside him, feeling a bit awkward, but Dave created an atmosphere of confidence. You know, Alice, I've wanted to say this for a long time. You're the real deal. Today, you showed everyone that, even those who didn't want to see it. She looked at him in surprise. You think I was just trying to survive in this world that's so foreign to me? Dave smiled. This isn't a foreign world. You made it yours. They just haven't gotten used to it yet. But it doesn't matter what others think. You handled it, and I admire you for that. Alice felt her eyes welling up with tears. You don't even know how hard that was, she whispered. I know, Dave replied softly. I saw how hard you tried. That deserves respect. You're stronger than many. Alice wiped a tear away, feeling her soul calming a little. Thank you, Dave. I really needed that right now. She looked directly into his eyes. I've seen many people break under that kind of pressure. But you kept going even when the whole world was against you. That's impressive. Alice felt her face warming from his words. She smiled, truly for the first time that evening. You think too highly of me. No, Alice, I think about you exactly what I see, Dave said firmly. I want you to know, you have support. If you ever need help, or just someone to listen, I'm here. She nodded, feeling grateful. This conversation held more warmth and understanding than the entire evening at the restaurant. Thank you, Dave, she said softly. That means a lot to me. He stood up, extended his hand, and they walked toward her car together. Now, let's get you home. It's late, and you deserve a good rest. After everything, she smiled, accepting his offer, and felt that the evening hadn't turned out so badly. With Dave by her side, she regained her confidence and the strength to move forward. A week had passed since the unfortunate evening at the restaurant. Alice looked out the window of her studio, where everything was back to normal. The sewing machine hummed softly, fabric rolls neatly lined up on the shelf, and a satisfied client was trying on a new dress at the next table. But Alice wasn't entirely present. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Her phone vibrated on the table. Alice picked it up and smiled. It was a message from Dave. "How's your day? Don't forget, you need to rest." She lingered on the screen for a moment before placing the phone back down, feeling warmth spreading inside. Over the past few days, Dave had become an important part of her life. He didn't pressure her, didn't demand anything, he just was there, supporting her when she needed it. She thought about how easy and natural their communication was. Every conversation with him felt like a breath of fresh air. Late in the evening, they met at a cozy cafe nearby. Dave ordered a hot chocolate for her and his usual strong coffee for himself. Outside, the snow was slowly falling. "You look much calmer," Dave observed, setting his cup on the table. "Guess so," Alice smiled. "I thought everything had fallen apart, but now I realize it was the beginning of something new. Sometimes, to start a new chapter, you have to close the old one," he nodded. Alice looked at him carefully. In his eyes, she saw sincerity that was disarming. She didn't need to pretend or play a role. He accepted her as she was. "You helped me, Dave," she said quietly. "I don't even know how to thank you." "No need to thank me," he waved it off. "I'm just glad to see you smile now." They talked for a long time, discussing her work, his plans, and funny moments from their lives. Alice felt more and more that Dave was the person who could become part of her new life. A few months later, her studio was thriving. Alice expanded the space, adding another room for client consultations. She noticed how, with each passing day, she was becoming more confident in her abilities. Dave also became a frequent guest in her life. They spent evenings together, talking about the future. Their relationship was built on trust, not fear or conditions. "You're strong in spirit, just like you," Alice said, stopping and looking at him with warmth. "And I've never met anyone who could accept me as I am," Dave replied, smiling. "I will always be by your side," he said, leaning closer. In that moment, Alice realized that happiness isn't about external attributes or the opinions of others. Happiness is being yourself with someone who values you for that. Alice let go of the past, with its humiliations and fears, and stepped into a new life, where love, support, and respect awaited her.